Leo had blocked Caleb again. It was a familiar silence, a digital wall erected after Caleb missed their anniversary dinner for a last-minute meeting at the office. In the past, Caleb would have told himself that this was just how it was, that relationships like theirs, always on the fringe, required a little more patience, a little more forgiveness. But after 7 years, the pattern had worn thin. Every argument was a one-way street. Leo's cold shoulder, the inevitable block, and finally, Caleb's apology, usually accompanied by a carefully chosen gift. He often wondered if he was a boyfriend or a subordinate. So this time, when Leo's ultimatum came, the word goodbye hanging in the air like a guillotine, Caleb simply let out a long, slow breath. He said, "Okay." It wasn't the first time Leo had used the threat of leaving as leverage. Caleb, acutely aware of the fragility of their world, had never once uttered the word himself. To him, it was a sacred pact. To Leo, it seemed to be a tool, a weapon to be deployed over the smallest infraction until Caleb capitulated. That was why the quiet acceptance on Caleb's face was so jarring. Leo's eyes widened in disbelief. In the next instant, the glass of water in his hand hit the hardwood floor, shattering into a spray of crystal shards. He demanded to know what Caleb meant by that. Caleb had no desire for another fight. He silently retrieved a dustpan and broom from the kitchen closet, sweeping the glittering fragments into a neat pile. He explained, his voice even, that they needed space, a real separation to think things through. He had already started looking at new apartments and would be out as soon as possible. Leo's face hardened. He crossed his arms, a bitter smile twisting his lips. He said if Caleb wanted to leave, he should do it now, before the day was over. Caleb had expected at least a flicker of hesitation, a moment of shared history to soften the blow. There was none. He agreed to move out that afternoon. He reminded Leo that the rent was paid through the end of the month, and that he could decide whether to renew the lease or find a smaller place. He also promised to cover their last utility bill when it arrived. Leo's voice trembled as he cut him off. He challenged Caleb to find anyone else whose anniversary was as pathetic as his. He talked about how Mark's boyfriend had bought him a Tag Heuer, how Daniel's partner had whisked him away for a weekend in Aspen. Even Jessica from his office, her husband, knew enough to book a table at a Michelin-starred restaurant. And what did Caleb do? He didn't even show up. The old script began to play out. Every fight was a mix of dredging up past grievances and comparing Caleb to an idealized version of other men. It was a subtle indictment of his inadequacy. Mark's boyfriend was from a wealthy family. Daniel's partner was 30 years older and a senior partner at a law firm. Caleb, just a few years into his career, felt the futility of the comparison. It dawned on him then that Leo wasn't angry about the missed dinner. He was angry that Caleb couldn't provide the watch or the ski trip. Still, Caleb tried to explain, his words feeling hollow even to himself. He said it wasn't intentional, that a major client from out of town had arrived unexpectedly and his boss insisted he be there. Leo scoffed, expressing disbelief that the company would grind to a halt without a junior programmer like him. Caleb clarified that he was the lead on the project's core technology and that his presence had been essential. He had been working overtime for a week straight, hoping the project's success would finally give them enough for a down payment on a small condo. He had already made reservations and bought flowers, intending to celebrate a day late. But Leo wasn't interested in his reasons. All he saw was the empty seat at the table on the designated day. Everything else was just an excuse. Caleb's hands trembled slightly, a side effect of low blood sugar. He had been at the office since the previous morning and hadn't eaten a thing. He lacked the energy for another pointless argument, so he said nothing. Leo furiously packed a backpack, then paused at the door. He looked back at Caleb, his expression cold, and stated that if Caleb left, he should never come back. He threatened to throw out anything of Caleb's left in the apartment by the time he returned that evening. Then he slammed the door shut. Leaning against the wall for support, Caleb made his way to the kitchen and heated up a frozen pizza. The client meeting had run late, and his team had pulled an all-nighter to revise the proposal. He had walked in the door to a storm of accusations. Now, after eating, the warmth in his stomach brought a little strength back to his limbs. He was straightening the couch cushions that had been knocked to the floor when the doorbell rang. It was a delivery driver, holding a small box with the Apple logo. Caleb suddenly remembered Leo's expression when he'd mentioned the anniversary gift. It was a complex mix of contempt, disappointment, and anger. Leo had sneered, asking if an Apple Watch was really all Caleb thought he was worth. The watch wasn't a luxury timepiece, but it had cost nearly $500, more than the combined value of everything Caleb was wearing. Shaking his head with a sense of resignation, he told the driver to return the package. After the driver left, Caleb sat on the sofa and looked around the apartment they had shared for 4 years. He remembered when it was empty, a blank canvas they had filled with memories. The ficus plant he'd nurtured on the balcony, their shirts tangled together on a chair, the jar of homemade pickles Leo had made still in the fridge. It had felt so much like a home. He realized now it had only ever been a temporary illusion. He checked into a hotel and immediately contacted a broker. By evening, he had signed a lease on a one-bedroom in Queens. The rent was a full $1,000 less than their old place. His office was located outside the city's core, so apartments nearby were newer and more affordable. They had always rented in an expensive, aging building in Manhattan for Leo's convenience, a cost Caleb had shouldered alone. With the sudden surplus in his budget, he decided to order the large pizza for himself that night. While eating, he scrolled through Reddit and stumbled upon a post from Leo's alternate account. The title was, "My boyfriend missed our anniversary. Is he cheating?" In the post, Leo listed Caleb's supposed transgressions: his failure to beg for forgiveness this time, the cheap gift, his immediate decision to move out. Most damningly, he mentioned that on the anniversary itself, Caleb had driven another man to a hotel, and the man had complimented him in the car. The conclusion was foregone. Caleb was cheating. The comments section was a chorus of agreement, urging Leo to leave the unfaithful partner. Caleb lost his appetite. It was one of Leo's strangest habits. He would confide in friends, colleagues, even anonymous strangers on the internet, but never directly with Caleb. He suspected infidelity but wouldn't confront him, preferring to crowdsource opinions from the web. He loved to make Caleb guess to decipher his moods. Caleb recalled a birthday where he'd asked what Leo wanted. Leo had been coy, telling him to just figure it out. Thinking his laptop was old, Caleb bought him a new one. Leo then complained about the specs, then the design, never admitting he had actually wanted a specific watch. When Caleb couldn't read his mind, he would simply apologize, but that wasn't enough either. Leo would press, demanding to know exactly what he was apologizing for. In their relationship, Leo was always right and Caleb was always wrong. But if he was truly so incompetent, so constantly messing things up, why had Leo stayed with him for so long? He was about to close the app when a new comment caught his eye. Someone asked how Leo knew he'd driven a man to a hotel. Leo's reply came a moment later. He had checked the dashcam footage. He'd listened to their conversation, heard the client remark on Caleb's professional demeanor, and how he seemed like a good guy. A chill ran down Caleb's spine. He had always known about Leo's deep-seated insecurity, stemming from his father's infidelity when he was a child. Caleb had tried to be understanding. Finding a genuine connection was hard enough. and their shared background of growing up in single-parent homes had created what he thought was a special bond. He had made allowances. At first, it was just letting Leo know his plans for the evening. Then, he had to report any social gathering that included other gay men. Soon, Leo was checking his texts, his Venmo history, his social media. Every interaction with anyone, man or woman, was scrutinized. A friendly emoji from a male friend was proof of ill intent. A female client buying him a coffee prompted questions of why she'd chosen him and not someone else. Caleb had told himself over and over that Leo was just afraid of losing him. He had given Leo all his passwords, but it was never enough. Now he was checking the dashcam. His love felt like a gilded cage, beautiful on the surface but slowly suffocating him. He decided it was time to break free. After all, the foundation of a relationship should be joy, not a constant state of anxiety. He took 3 days off, moved into his new apartment, bought some basic furniture, and began to settle in. On his first day back at the office, he ran into a problem. Leo, who worked for a key supplier, was the main point of contact for his team. After Leo rejected a standard submission form from Caleb's intern for the third time, demanding a complete overhaul of a format they had used for years, Caleb finally called him. He asked why the sudden change was necessary. Leo's voice was ice over the phone. He asked if Caleb was sticking up for his new favorite, sarcastically noting how flattered he must be that the kid called him by his first name. Caleb sighed, rubbing his temples. He explained that the intern was just a college kid who was polite to everyone and, for what it was worth, was straight and had a girlfriend. Leo's reply was sharp and cruel, saying of course a straight guy wouldn't be interested in someone like Caleb, no matter how much he tried to suck up. The words stung, and Caleb felt a flash of anger. He retorted that Leo was right. The intern wasn't interested, so Leo could stop imagining a rivalry that didn't exist. He hung up. The intern looked at him, worried. He asked if he'd caused trouble, offering to stay late and redo the forms. Caleb waved him off, not having the heart to explain that the kid was just collateral damage in a war he knew nothing about. Breaking a 7-year habit wasn't easy. Caleb's life had been shaped around Leo's needs. He had gotten used to waking at 6:30 to make oatmeal for Leo's sensitive stomach, even though he didn't have to be at work until 10. Now, without the need, he still woke up at the same time. He started going for morning runs. He had meticulously tracked every holiday, Valentine's Day, their anniversary, even smaller ones, because Leo placed immense importance on them, requiring thoughtful, expensive gifts. Now, he deleted the reminders from his calendar. Weekends, once spent trailing Leo through trendy Soho boutiques, were now his own. He could spend them playing video games or sleeping in. He was slowly erasing the traces of Leo from his life. One evening, he got a call from Jessica, Leo's work friend. She urged him to reconsider, saying all couples fight and that their connection was too rare to throw away over a small argument. Then she lowered her voice, telling him about Ben, a new guy at their company. She said Leo and Ben were getting very close, and if Caleb didn't apologize soon, he would regret it. Without waiting for a reply, she sent a flood of photos. Leo and Ben laughing, arms slung over each other's shoulders. Caleb didn't believe Leo had moved on that quickly. It was a familiar tactic. In college, after a fight he could no longer remember, Leo had filled his social media with cryptic posts, forgetting the past and starting over, paired with a photo showing the reflection of two men in a window. "Friends are the best support," captioned a picture of a hot chocolate and a man's hand. It had worked. Caleb, panicked and hundreds of miles away, had taken a 13-hour bus ride to see him, only to find the new man was just a classmate Leo had been using as a prop to test his devotion. The human heart can only withstand so many tests. This time, seeing the photos, Caleb felt not a pang of jealousy or despair, but a profound sense of relief. He had no desire to rush to Leo's side and demand an explanation. His love had been worn away by 1,000 tiny manipulations. He suspected Jessica's call had been prompted by Leo himself. So, in his reply to her, he wrote the words he intended for Leo. He told Jessica there was no need to send him updates anymore. They had broken up. If Leo had found someone new, he wished him well. The next day, Caleb's boss asked him to deliver some documents to Leo's company, along with an orchid to congratulate them on a new project launch. When he arrived, Leo was at a computer with Ben, leaning in close. Leo saw him, raised an eyebrow, and deliberately turned his body further toward Ben. Seeing Caleb with the orchid, the office erupted in knowing smiles. Jessica winked at him. Someone joked about how men can't stay mad for more than 3 seconds. They teased them, calling it their strange way of showing affection. Jessica shooed everyone away, telling them to give the couple some space. Leo cleared his throat. Though his expression remained stern, a flicker of triumph showed in his eyes. This was another part of their routine. Caleb would make a public gesture of apology, satisfying Leo's need for public validation. Leo would feign reluctance before graciously accepting in front of their cheering colleagues. Caleb suddenly recalled a male coworker once quietly telling him that while pride might not matter in love, a partner who truly loved you wouldn't constantly humiliate you. He wondered now if Leo's need for these public displays was a test of love or a test of obedience. Did he even love him? The thought was fleeting. It didn't matter anymore. He met Leo's expectant gaze and spoke before he could. He clarified loudly that the orchid was a gift for the whole company, a congratulations on their project. Then he said he was heading to their director's office and walked away, leaving Leo's face to pale, his jaw tightening as he watched him go. When Caleb emerged from the director's office, he noticed the atmosphere had changed. People were looking at him with judgment. He didn't have to guess why. His suspicions were confirmed on his way out when he overheard a few familiar voices in the hallway. They said Caleb didn't appreciate Leo and would regret it. One mentioned hearing that Caleb was bisexual and had cheated with a woman. The consensus was that he was trash. They lamented how Leo had come out to his family, given up a comfortable life back home, all to be with Caleb in New York, only to be betrayed. Caleb knew the narrative Leo must have spun, a tale of self-sacrifice and martyrdom. The centerpiece was always his move to the city. Leo was from a small town in Ohio. After college, his mother had arranged a job for him at a local CR union. A car and a house were practically guaranteed. But for Caleb, he had confronted his family, leading to a rift, and left it all behind to start from scratch in New York. By this logic, any betrayal on Caleb's part made him a monster. But a person couldn't live their life shackled by someone else's version of the truth. Besides, their opinions would soon be irrelevant. Thanks to his performance on the recent project, Caleb had been offered a position to lead market expansion in Europe. He would be leaving soon. Just as he was preparing for the move, a crisis erupted. Ben, the new hire, accidentally deleted a crucial piece of code, causing a catastrophic error in their entire high-frequency trading system. An error was worse than a crash. It meant that when the market opened on Monday, the system would execute faulty trades, costing investors millions. An emergency team was assembled from both companies. They worked through the weekend, a frantic race against the clock. After a grueling 36 hours, the system was restored. Ben bowed deeply to the room. He apologized profusely for his mistake. Immediately, Leo stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. He took the blame, saying he hadn't explained things clearly enough and that it was his responsibility. He offered to buy everyone dinner. Ben's eyes welled with tears as he thanked him. The room buzzed with praise for Leo's kindness and leadership. Someone remarked that if Leo wasn't gay, they'd be trying to date him. Leo was always gracious and understanding with outsiders. With Caleb, it was different. Caleb remembered when he had first joined his company and made a rookie mistake while liaising with Leo's team. His predecessor had left no handover notes. Before anyone else could even comment, Leo's face had turned to stone. That night at home, he had accused Caleb of embarrassing him on purpose, questioning how he had even been hired. Caleb had never been a natural at things. He'd always had to work twice as hard as everyone else. As a kid, he struggled with focus, misreading questions, and making careless errors. He later learned it was a form of attention deficit that had improved with age. He was used to being underestimated, but he had always hoped for a partner who would see his effort. Someone who would say, "It's okay, we'll fix it together." Why did Leo reserve all his patience and empathy for strangers while directing his sharpest criticisms at him? Leo had once said it was because with Caleb, he could be his most authentic self. But Caleb wanted tenderness too. He didn't need grand gestures, just a safe harbor, not a hailstorm of blame when he was already down. A few days later, a college friend passed through the city, and over beers, Caleb finally asked the question out loud. His friend, who had far more experience in these matters, didn't hesitate. He said it was because Leo was both selfish and insecure. He might love Caleb, but he loved himself more. In the outside world, he felt vulnerable, so he wore a mask of kindness. At home, Caleb's love for him made Caleb the vulnerable one. So Leo asserted control by belittling him. For Leo, the satisfaction gained from this control was more important than Caleb's happiness. It was a stunningly simple and painful revelation. He did not love Caleb, he just loved himself more. 3 days before his flight to London, a voice message appeared on his phone late at night. It was Leo, his voice hoarse. He mumbled something about having a fever and feeling terrible. Leo had a weak constitution. A fever for him was always severe, accompanied by body aches and nausea. He sounded delirious. He must have meant to send the message to his friend Mark. Caleb called Mark, who answered on the second try, his voice muffled. He was in Cabo, just getting out of the water. Caleb hung up without explaining. After a moment of indecision, he knew he had to check on him. He threw on a jacket and drove to their old apartment. The passcode, his birthday and Leo's combined, still worked. The apartment was a mess. Dirty clothes were piled on the sofa, takeout containers overflowed from the trash, and the plants on the balcony were withered and dead. Clearly, Leo hadn't been taking care of himself. Caleb found him in the bedroom, his face flushed with fever. A quick temperature check confirmed it, 103, 6 degrees Fahrenheit. He went through the familiar motions. Water, medication, a cool cloth on his forehead. Leo stirred, saw him, and drifted back to sleep. By the time he was done, it was 2 a.m. Caleb fell into a restless sleep on the couch. He woke at dawn and checked Leo's temperature again. The fever had broken. Leo was awake, watching him. He asked, his voice raspy, why Caleb was there. The question made Caleb feel like an intruder. He explained briefly about the mistaken message and his concern. Now that the fever was down, he said he should go, reminding him about the medicine on the nightstand. As he turned to leave, Leo grabbed his wrist. He asked him to stay. The request caught Caleb off guard. As an ex-boyfriend, his presence felt inappropriate. He was determined to move on and didn't want to give Leo any false hope of reconciliation. But he was sick. Even as a friend, walking away felt wrong. He stayed silent, unable to meet his eyes. Leo tried another approach. He asked if it was true about the man he drove to a hotel on their anniversary. Caleb sighed. He explained that it was their company's biggest client, and since he was the only one who hadn't been drinking, his boss had asked him to drive. Leo paused, then his voice took on a wounded tone. He complained that it was such a simple misunderstanding, and that Caleb could have explained it all from the beginning. Caleb replied with a bitter smile that Leo had never given him the chance. Leo changed the subject again, telling him not to worry about the pictures with Ben. He said they were just colleagues and nothing was going on between them. Caleb nodded, saying he knew. Leo looked at him expectantly, waiting for the next move, the opening that would lead them back to their old dynamic. But Caleb only asked if there was anything else. If not, he was leaving. A sense of urgency entered Leo's voice. He grabbed Caleb's arm again. He insisted that now that all the misunderstandings were cleared up, there was no reason for him to leave. Caleb raised an eyebrow. He couldn't believe Leo thought these small issues were the root of their problem. They were merely the final straws. The foundation had been crumbling for years. He shook his head and said it was because they had already broken up. Leo's lips trembled. He finally confessed that telling Caleb to leave and never come back had just been words spoken in anger. He hadn't meant it. He just wanted Caleb to comfort him, to fight for him. His voice broke, and tears streamed down his face. He asked why, after all the other times, this time was different. Why hadn't Caleb come back to him? Seeing his tears, Caleb felt a momentary pang of softness. He spoke gently, reminding Leo of his deepest desire, the one he'd always talked about. A home, a family to make up for the one he'd lost. Caleb had worked himself to the bone for that dream, to buy a small place for them. He had cared for Leo meticulously, tolerated his moods, and planned a future that had Leo at its center. He had fought to build a life for them against the odds. He reminded him how many times he had begged him to stop using the word breakup, how it felt like a knife twisting in the heart that was so determined to love him forever. Their breakup wasn't about one fight. It was the culmination of years of exhaustion and heartbreak. He just didn't have the courage to love him anymore. Leo shook his head, wrapping his arms around Caleb from behind, holding on tight. He pleaded with him not to break up. He started to ramble about a stray cat Caleb had once taken in, asking why Caleb would rescue an animal but throw him away. Caleb gently pried his fingers off, one by one. He apologized. Leo's desperation turned to accusation. He didn't believe it. He said it had only been a month, that Caleb couldn't have fallen out of love so quickly. He accused him of having wanted out for a long time, just using this fight as an excuse to dump him. The accusation was a final, unfair blow. Caleb's voice was low and sad as he asked Leo what he, in turn, had ever done for his love. Had he ever shown concern when Caleb dragged himself out of bed after a late night at work to make him breakfast? Had he ever suggested buying one less designer shirt so Caleb didn't have to eat cheap takeout to save money? Had he ever cared about Caleb's feelings when he forced him to apologize in front of their friends? The questions hung in the air, heavy with unspoken resentment. Caleb had wanted a stable home so badly that he had contorted himself to fit Leo's needs, not realizing that the pain was a sign that they were never the right fit. He told Leo they were destined to fail and that it was best to part amicably. He left the harshest truths unsaid, a final act of kindness for their 7 years. He left without saying goodbye. Leo sat on the sofa, his eyes red, not saying a word. 3 days later, Caleb was on a plane to London. In London, he met new people. One of them was a man named Ethan. He was emotionally stable, kind, and perceptive. But Caleb was wary, unable to tell if this was his true personality or just a carefully constructed persona. He kept his distance. Ethan was direct. He told Caleb it was okay, that they could just spend time together and see what happened. "You have to try on the shoes," he'd said with a smile, "to see if they fit." The logic was sound, so they started as friends. Ethan didn't play games. A few days before his birthday, he asked Caleb if he had a gift in mind, and if not, he had a request. When Caleb asked what he wanted, he grinned and said he wanted a Nintendo Switch so they could play games together. But it wasn't a one-way street. Ethan was always surprising Caleb, standing in line for a limited-ion pair of sneakers he wanted, or tracking down a signed jersey from his favorite basketball player. He joked that it was a shame he was gay, because he had a whole set of skills for wooing women that were now being wasted on Caleb. They made it official after 3 months. Ethan cooked a candlelit dinner, and as fireworks from a city festival lit up the sky, he asked Caleb if he would be his partner. If the answer was yes, he was allowed to put one of the matching silver rings on his finger. Caleb laughed and asked what would happen if the answer was no. Ethan scratched the back of his neck, suddenly shy. He said in that case he'd just ask again in a little while. After they got together, Ethan brought home a rescue puppy they named Buddy. He said Buddy was their shared responsibility, a new bond between them. Caleb was struck by the memory of wanting a dog years ago, but Leo had refused, saying it was too much trouble. Ethan insisted he would handle all the walks and feeding. Caleb's only job was to play with him. He had never imagined being the one who was cared for. While he was perfectly capable of taking care of himself, there was a profound comfort in being cherished. 6 months later, Caleb had to return to the U.S. for work meetings. Ethan, who hadn't been back in years, decided to come with him. They left Buddy with their landlord and flew to New York. After landing, Ethan was curious to try a small diner near Caleb's old university that he had fond memories of. He went next door to grab some sodas while Caleb went inside to order. There, he saw Leo. He was thinner, with dark circles under his eyes. He looked exhausted. The moment he saw Caleb, he rushed over. He asked where Caleb had been, why he hadn't answered his calls or texts, his voice a torrent of accusation. Caleb had thought he'd made himself perfectly clear, but it was as if Leo had selective amnesia. He grabbed Caleb's arm, refusing to let go. Just then, Ethan returned with the drinks, stopping short at the tense scene. He asked who this was. Caleb pried Leo's fingers from his arm. He told Ethan it was just a friend, but his tone betrayed him. He was about to explain, terrified that Ethan would misunderstand, but Ethan just patted his shoulder. He gave him a knowing look and asked if it was the ex, the one who wasn't over him. He offered to step aside to give them space to talk. Caleb had braced himself for a cold glare or a silent retreat. The understanding in Ethan's eyes was so disarming it almost brought tears to his. For once, he didn't have to manage his partner's fragile emotions. He took Ethan's hand. He said it was fine, that he didn't need to go. Leo stared at their joined hands, his expression shifting from disbelief to raw, hysterical grief. He cried out, asking how Caleb could do this to him. It had only been a few months. Did their 7 years mean nothing? He launched into his litany of sacrifices. The bank job, his family and friends, the comfortable life he'd abandoned to struggle with Caleb in the city. His entire youth, he wailed, was given to Caleb. Then he turned on Ethan, his voice dripping with venom. He warned him about men like Ethan, the seemingly perfect professionals, claiming they were promiscuous and that Ethan would probably give him a disease. His outburst drew a crowd. People listened to his tragic story and began to murmur, casting judgmental looks at Caleb and Ethan. Phones came out, recording the drama. Caleb was done. He was tired of the victim narrative, and he refused to let Ethan be dragged into it. He decided once and for all to speak the whole truth. He looked directly at Leo. He stated, his voice clear and steady, that they had broken up months ago, and that it was Leo who had initiated it, a fact both their sets of colleagues could attest to. He acknowledged Leo's 7 years, but reminded him that during those years, he had been the primary caretaker and the primary earner. His youth was just as valuable as Leo's. He dismantled the myth of the cushy bank job, revealing it was a low-level contract position with no future. He pointed out that Leo had few relatives left in his small town, and his mother wasn't wealthy. The comfortable life was a tract house in the suburbs they'd gotten from a rezoning deal and a used car from his father. He told Leo and the assembled crowd that he hadn't moved to New York purely for love. He had moved because he couldn't stand the small-town mentality, the lack of opportunity, the absence of a single Starbucks. He had moved for a better career and a better life for himself, then twisted the narrative to make it a grand sacrifice for Caleb. He asked him if he was done emotionally blackmailing him. Leo's lips trembled, but no words came out. He just kept repeating that it wasn't true. Caleb continued, his voice softer now but no less firm. He said he had kept quiet before to preserve some dignity for them both. But Leo had crossed a line by involving an innocent person. He declared that he could stand there and swear he had done nothing wrong in their 7 years together. He had done everything in his power to love him, to sustain their relationship. Then he looked at Leo and asked if he could do the same. Could he honestly say, detail by detail, that he had been a good partner? Leo couldn't answer. He took a step back, looked at Caleb one last time, then covered his face and ran. The onlookers, realizing he was the one with something to hide, lowered their phones and dispersed. Caleb let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He turned to Ethan, apologizing for the scene on his first day back. Ethan wrapped him in a hug, holding him tightly. He stroked his back. Poor thing, he murmured. You went through so much. I'll have to be extra good to you from now on. He smiled. It's all over. The past is the past. From now on, I'm here. Caleb felt a stinging in his eyes. Felt so good. This time, it wasn't him offering the apology. This time, someone was holding his hand, offering him comfort.